And welcome back to another episode of Geek Centurions Video Boy Live.
Be Joe.
And so we actually never got a chance to watch this movie just because we got busy. Plus, I think it was during Compalooza weekend, but the Mandalorian Grogu came out. We still haven't watched it just because we're just busy right now.
Uh, yeah,
We
and
haven't
I
even.
think part of it,
Mm-hmm.
um, I will say this. So you brought this topic up, mainly about Star Wars, and it is kind of a permutation because I think what was it? I think I remember hearing that the movie was doing not as well as they expected at the box office, as I recall correctly.
Yeah,
Like it's doing okay, but not to where you would expect a Star Wars movie to do, right?
yeah. So that's kind of what the topic is gonna be. It's like what kind of is the future of Star Wars now? Um, really, just kind of like where are things going? How do we feel about them? And like, do we have confidence within the product now? And I hate to say that, and just just generally how people are feeling about Star Wars. Personally, I think that Star Wars in itself is no, it's not bad. Star Wars isn't bad. I think it's just we talked about this numerous times. I think you can go forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things about, and this is sort of my own personal opinion about Star Wars, the fandom in general of just like a lot of Star Wars fans just tend to be very overtly critical of the franchise as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's just a what you call it, a yearning for nostalgia of the olden days, because that sort of seems to be sort of a trending topic,
Yeah.
at least in the Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
fandom, right? Like a lot of people sort of talk about like how the people who like the original trilogy really bashed the prequels so hard, and that's why they have the reputation they used to have. And obviously, there's some merit to that, although the recent sort of, well, not recent, it's been happening since I think what the during the middle of the sequel trilogy of like sort of a rehabilitation of the image of the prequels of like,
Yeah,
man,
yeah, yeah.
they weren't that
Which
bad
is which
guys.
is something I always think about. Like that could be like this part of the discussion really. Like, are how are people gonna feel about these movies, these projects later on? And honestly, when we were first discussing this, you brought up the fact that there was a gap between then and now. That's kind of made it easier for people to be like, the prequels are actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's the people who grew up with those prequels, right? That
Granted, we grew up with those prequels.
yeah, I was gonna say like it's a bit of an interesting dichotomy because we grew up with the prequels, and I was listen, I'll be honest, I think my first exposure to the OT was the Lego Star Wars game.
I think we saw a couple of the movies.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing a couple on cable, but not enough to remember most of it. But I mean, listen, last time I checked, I knew that Darth Vader was Luke's father because of the Lego game. I'm pretty sure. You can quote me on that. So, anyways, yeah, I like listen to bury the point here. Like, as a generation that grew up with the prequels, even we were kind of just like when watching the OT stuff, it's like, okay, yeah, no, this is probably better
this
than.
this this yeah, no, I was kind of a little more invested in the original trilogy than I was the prequel.
Yeah, and the thing is that I know people sort of have this feeling because of how the sequels essentially sort of panned out, the sequel trilogy. But at the end of the day, I would still hold the merit of the prequels are not that great, with episode 3 being the only one that's decent,
Mm.
but you still have some issues to it. And I know some people will argue that, like, well, it was George's vision, and that's the only thing that sort of matters, right? Which is like, yes, but like, you can still call it a subpar, you know,
Yeah, just
execution of the vision.
just because it still has a good structure, has a good through line, has a good beginning, middle, and end, doesn't mean it's still a good story.
Yeah,
Because there's still a lot of stuff in them in those movies that are like just not good. It's not good at all. But then again, like I would also argue like half of it's because I think people wanted something else, like something I feel like, and this is kind of like what you were saying earlier, the contradiction that is being a Star Wars fan and someone who absorbs this media. the fandom is that sometimes they can't let something be for someone else, right? Because as much as I don't look back as fondly to say the Phantom Menace, I will say it does feel more like that was more for a kids movie.
Yeah, I mean Jar Jar, big factor to that too.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Like a lot of people have issues with Jar Jar. I do agree with those issues, but on paper he works as like this sort of like funny, almost. I hesitate to say the word, but this is the first thing that came to mind when I'm thinking of this right now. Is like the proto minion.
proto minions,
Yeah,
like
just
yeah, I
the
guess.
character that's meant to be annoying.
Yeah, I get. I think you probably mean more of like a character that's meant to how do you say?
It's for the kids.
Yeah,
It's for the kids. Jar Jar
yeah,
was for the kids.
yeah. But yeah, no,
Because I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't have a problem with Jar Jar growing up.
yeah, I think he was alright. I don't
Yeah,
think I ever found him like completely annoying. But then again, we were probably the target demographic for Jar Jar anyway, and
yeah.
we were probably like, hey, he's alright, I guess.
That's when I get older, I was like, oh my god, can you just shut up?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, no, I think yeah, obviously a lot of discussion that comes with it is with it's like the big discussion like I mean like Star Wars has become so oversaturated that like a new
Yeah,
Star Wars movie isn't making the big rounds or deals. It's kind of crazy,
yeah. Because
right?
people also gotta remember this is around the time where there was this new Star Wars movie every other year because that was the plan. Because we had like was it Force Awakens, then Rogue One, Last Jedi,
The
uh,
Han Solo movie.
Han Solo movie, and I think there was a gap between that and the
Episode 9.
yeah, and you also had the shows, right?
Yeah, we had a fair amount of shows, but to be fair, I think most of those were like I think most people were alright at those. Like obviously, finishing up the Clone Wars, and then
The Rebels.
yeah, and then what you call it?
There was that one like the one show that was set between that was during the sequel trilogy.
Was it called Resistance?
I think that's what it was called.
Yeah,
That was one I didn't watch.
oh, well, for good
Well, it
reason.
wasn't for me. And I think
um,
that's also one thing. It's like I think it's also like just for some fans, it's like we kind of have to accept that some things aren't for us.
yeah, I mean obviously, there's quite a bit of that within Star Wars media in general, right? Like
Yeah,
there's gonna be kid stuff that just aims at just the kids and
that's
stuff.
fine.
And you even had stuff like Andor that's very more grounded and honestly very more
Mature.
mature look into the Star Wars universe itself. And people really like that
It was
show.
a fantastic
Yeah,
show.
yeah. So, it's yeah, it's one of those things where I kind of you put into your head of just like, oh yeah, no, these shows, they have like they're
Man,
doing a lot of things to like try to grasp like a whole net of like people to get stuff
yeah.
over with Star Wars,
Which
right?
honestly, thinking of it now, that's not even a bad idea.
No, not really. At the same time though, given I guess how the sequel trilogy ended up being, and like with Episode 9 being sort of just kind of like seen as just
Universally bad.
yeah. I mean, for what I understand, they are thinking about doing a new sequel trilogy. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of Star Wars movies in the works anyway, right?
You got the Tie Fighter, or not Tie Fighter,
It's
Rogue Squadron.
Rogue Squadron movie
Yeah,
with Ryan Gosling, right?
yeah.
He's in it.
And then you also have we just came out with Mandalorian Grogu. I think there's another planned trilogy which is gonna be interesting. I don't know how that's gonna work out. Um, but honestly, I think the problem again with it is that I don't think it's just that people aren't that interested. It's just that there's so much of it that it becomes sort of like harder to digest. That's only just a nature of the beast.
Yeah, I've been being owned by Disney because I'm trying to figure out like, is there any sort of direct comparison to what's happening to Star Wars? And I thought about the MCU, but at the same time, like, um, I feel like
I mean, to be honest, MCU was gonna happen regardless.
yeah, like that was gonna, the MCU would eventually start to lose steam, which it has, but at the same time, they are essentially going for one last swing of it with Phase 6, right?
You got Doomsday.
You got Doomsday, you had Spider-Man, right?
Yeah, and Endgame, Secret Wars. Like, there's still people who are into it, and there's still gonna be like a faction of like, people are always gonna watch a Spider-Man movie. People were excited for Fantastic Four.
Yeah, and freaking what was God? Well, I'm trying to remember what other movie came out last year for Marvel.
Oh, new
Thunderbolts.
Thunderbolts. Yeah,
Yeah, that was a surprising hit, right?
yeah,
And heck, even like Deadpool and Wolverine, that made money for Marvel just
yeah,
because it's like you got Deadpool and he's cool and Wolverine's there too, and
yeah.
it fit well into the MCU personally,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It's one of those things where like Marvel will probably not be as big as it was before, but they're okay. They're fine. Their other ventures have succeeded where others have not.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like eventually the Marvel money train probably would start to slow down, but I think they're hoping to take it at least with a bit of grace,
Yeah.
right? Um, but yeah, no, when it comes to Star Wars, right, like in terms of like, is the magic sort of gone, right? Of
Mm.
like, are people excited for a new Star Wars movie? And personally, I think Mandalorian Grogu not doing as well probably should have been a bit more like well known because I don't know. I don't want to compare it to the original Clone Wars movie that came out years back.
Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah, because remember, Clone Wars started as a movie first, and that movie didn't do too well. But then it was like it was supposed to be a pilot for the show anyway, so it was
Yeah.
like we're gonna make the show anyway. We just wanted to make the movie just to like get people to
Talk about it.
talk about it, right? So and that movie didn't do a whole lot. I don't remember people being like, "This is kind of ridiculous,"
Hmm.
or whatever. Or is it the downfall of Star Wars?
Yeah.
But I think it's partially because it was an animated movie,
Hmm.
right? So people were just less. I don't, and this is me disparaging animation, right? Because
Hmm.
I think I'm one of the, you and I have always been sort of like promoters of animated movies and stuff being treated just as well as regular
Yeah,
movies
I
and
love
stuff.
them. Yeah. Yeah,
But I think that was
the Mexican Frankenstein movie. Not the Guillermo del Toro one, but there's one that's out right now on Netflix. Frankenella, I think it was called. I can't pronounce it because every time I see it, I just can't want to pronounce it as Frankenstein. That's out right now on Netflix, and it's from like from a studio in Mexico. Yeah, I am Frankelda. Yeah, I gotta watch that later today. This fun, cool stop motion animated film.
yeah, that's cool.
Okay.
But yeah. Anyways, like I was saying, big supporters of treating animation as just as well as regular forms of visual media and stuff.
Yeah.
So I what I was I guess going for was that like maybe just not a whole lot of people were like, hey, it's an animated Star Wars movie, who cares, right?
Yeah, but years later, it became one of the best shows to come out from Star Wars.
Yeah, and that's sort of the dichotomy
Yeah.
there, right? And granted, I guess it's kind of an inverse effect of like Mandalorian was a good show. It like sold Disney Plus for a lot of people, right?
Hmm.
And eventually they made a movie, which again we haven't watched it, but from what I've heard, it seems like it's just an hour and a half long episode.
And that was kind of my issue with it, because I'm like, if it feels like it's gonna be like I could have just watched this on like Disney Plus, which one, that's the worst way to feel.
Yeah.
Two, it's even worse when you know it's gonna be there in like in a few months.
Mm-hmm.
So you just gotta do is really wait. And
Like,
that brings up the streaming killing the service kind of.
yeah, that's an interesting argument of like, did streaming kill Star Wars? Much in it's sort of a similar argument to like, did streaming kill the MCU, right? Because that's something a lot of people sort of talk about
Yeah.
when Disney Plus launched and you had all those Marvel shows for it,
Yeah.
right? And to a certain extent, there is a little, I guess, maybe truth to it.
Well, it just depends on how fast it got to streaming.
Well, yeah, that's a thing too, when it comes to like movies being released in theaters and then like coming to streaming in like a month or whatever.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, right, you had to wait like maybe 3, 4, 5 months for a movie to come out on DVD and Blu-ray. But with the advent of streaming and stuff, it's ultimately, especially with a lot of these movie companies owning their own streaming services, right,
Mm.
like Paramount and Disney and the Warner Brothers. Well, Yes, technically Warner
Yeah,
Brothers, right?
at this point, yes.
Yeah, and even Netflix or whatever, making movies
Mm-hmm.
on streaming and stuff, being able to just quickly output those products onto your streaming service within like a month, right?
Yeah.
It ultimately kind of. At the same time, we have seen a bit of resurgence to people going to the movie theaters as of late. And I think that's partially to do with a lot of newer films, right? Like Back Rooms and and a lot of these other movies that you probably wouldn't have normally be able to get on streaming. So maybe that's sort of a factor. But yeah, no, I do agree that, well, at least I do understand the viewpoint of like Disney Plus essentially sort of devaluing Star Wars as a brand, but at the same time, you know, I don't think we would have gotten something like Andor if it was not on streaming.
Yeah, because people will tend to forget that even like Rogue One was kind of like I like the movie. I wouldn't say it's the best one out of the new. Well, I probably would say out of like the Star Wars Disney era films, it probably is the best one. But that's like
You think it's a bit of a stretch?
that's what do you, I mean. You agree with that statement?
I will say it's one of those movies. I did like it. Gareth Edwards, he's a solid director, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of those movies I think that definitely puts the war in Star Wars, and I think a lot of people kind of like to see that sort of stuff. Although it's one of those things, as we're watching Andor, you're kind of like, we could have gotten more of this, because if I recall correctly, isn't the writer for Andor the same as the writer for
Yeah.
Rogue One? So it feels like Rogue One was just him being chained to the latches of
Film.
a film, and then Andor was sort of to make up for all that. Of like, no, let's actually get into the political intrigue. Let's actually get into the this, that, and the other things of how a rebellion starts and all this sort of stuff,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, yeah, all right, yeah. And then the movies, it works well for what it is,
Mm.
and I do probably would say it's out of the, I guess, standalone Star Wars movies,
Yeah.
not part of the main trilogy stuff, right? I would probably say it's the best, simply because.
I mean, I'm still adding the sequel trilogy in there. It still probably would be the best.
Okay,
That's where I'm kind of going with.
right.
Like I like Force Awakens. I did do like a lot of what is in the Last Jedi. There's stuff in there I don't like, and I don't like the Rise of Skywalker. So like, and I did not watch Han Solo just because I'm like, I think I'll be alright.
Yeah, like it's one of those things of like, did we really need an origin story for Han Solo? But at the same time, the whole premise of Rogue One is just how did they get those Death Star plans anyway, right?
True, but
But they make it interesting enough and sort of explain the whole
mm,
weakness of the Death Star. And it's like, oh, it was engineered in there the whole time, kind of thing. Like this, that, and the other thing. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, fair enough.
I was also gonna say like that one also makes sense in the fact that like all these stuff that like you tend to forget the people that are just regular people trying to die who try not to die.
Yeah,
So it works. I mean, ironically, they all die. Um, but yeah, with Mandalorian and Grogu, that one feels like it should have been good, but honestly, for me, I feel like the Mandalorian one just kind of like deteriorated over time. You had season one, which was great, season two, which was fantastic, season three was
you felt like it was a little too uh not reference flop, but
that's like not the right word to use even. Like see, I think season three was just kind of okay. Just like not really. It feels like we were just there just to finish off any story ends. But
mm-hmm.
then again, I was not a very much a fan of bringing back Grogu in into the fold after having such a good goodbye.
Yeah, no, that was I would probably agree with that, and it felt, and maybe this is just me, but I always felt that Mandalorian the show was ultimately trying to like retroactively make the premise for episode 9 to make sense, right? It feels like a
Yeah,
lot of the shows were
yeah,
kind of like sort of planting seeds of just like,
Well, I mean, even the Clone Wars did that
yeah,
because like it gave Anakin more of a character. Like before we even got to the stuff that would be in Revenge of the Sith, you know.
yeah,
So like that only makes the most sense. But yeah, I think the problem with it is also just that there's so much of it, and like we're just kind of like I think the reason why we're not excited is because there like where is there to go, you know? Whether or not you like the sequel trilogy is just that ultimately it kind of left you underwhelmed, and where do you go from there? And if we're still using like the MCU as an example, everything went so high that afterwards, what kind of even is the point? You know,
yeah. If you were to compare the two, I think you're kind of
ultimately
hitting.
you ultimately you're going to
Yeah,
because
because
there were just two things that are going on at the same time. And we're not talking about DC just because like DC was always it was kind of like just there
yeah. So yeah, I was gonna
until
say
now.
yeah, I was gonna say if anything, right, like Marvel. There's a lot of people that sort of talk that Marvel sort of supplanted Star Wars in terms of the cultural zeitgeist of like every movie's an event. You got to go watch the movie or whatever,
Hmm.
right? That kind of thing. And obviously with Marvel, they built up all the way to the Infinity. Their Infinity Saga got built up to Endgame, right? Like it sort of felt like all the strings were sort of tightly neat and wrapped in a bow. And while there's still stories you could continue, right? For most people, a lot of the main characters had sort of their finishing arcs, right?
Yeah.
Cap gets his sort of happy ending. Tony sort of gets his sort of narrative end, right?
Hmm.
That sort of thing. And you still had stories you could tell with some of the other characters, but for the most part, I think most people were sort of satisfied with that. And there's probably some people retroactively going like they could have just taken like a year or two off of Marvel stuff and then come back with something to set up the new saga, right?
Yeah.
Which I mean, honestly, given what happened after, right, with the whole pandemic stuff, it probably would have made sense just to hold everything back.
Mm.
But whatever.
Yeah. That works.
Yeah, and with Star Wars, I think it's more sort of, it's obviously people were very disappointed with the sequel trilogy just because it ultimately just ended up being sort of a rehash. Well, Force Awakens' biggest critique
Sin.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, sin, if you will, is being a rehash of the OT.
Mm.
And I think I've always had this sort of thought process of like the sequel trilogies in their own right are kind of just weird meta narratives on Star Wars or how people act about Star Wars than being their own movies and stuff,
Mm.
right? Because ultimately, a lot of the stuff that I think influenced why Force Awakens is a thing is because people, did not like the prequels so much because of the stuff they felt they strayed away from. So more practical effects, going back to Empire Rebel dynamic, but with the Resistance and the First Order kind of thing, right?
Even though it made no sense.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then Last Jedi was sort of a reaction to that backlash of as much as people don't like Ryan Johnson and Last Jedi, I personally do commend him for going out and actually doing what Star Wars fans were saying that hey, make it different, make it new, make it do things differently,
You.
shake it up, and he does it, and it's like, why'd you do that?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you asked for it.
Yeah, because like in theory, like Ryan Johnson's whole idea of like you aren't tied to these things. You can be your own link thing. So I have a hard time explaining it, but like the idea that anyone can become a Jedi, anyone can become a hero in their own story. That is such a better story than just leaving it to this royal family, basically.
Yeah, I do think that that sort of was like making Rey a nobody is like, yeah, that's a cool twist. Like we don't have to have her be related to Obi-Wan or whoever, right? Let's have her be, like you didn't have to like do this sort of thing. Like heck, even like, I know people say, I know we bring up the whole like technically royal family thing with Luke or whatever, but like he still kind of was a nobody basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Like narrative speaking, he's a farm boy, right?
yeah,
Like it's only later to say, oh yeah, my dad's Darth Vader. Okay, yeah, but
yeah.
I'm still I didn't know that. I'm still being raised to who I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Same thing with Ray. Ray wanted to find a place to belong. She finds it. It wasn't what she originally wanted to. She narrowly found a home.
yeah, with
The
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 resistance
the,
stuff,
the
yeah,
home that she always wanted. It wasn't that she needed, not the one that she wanted.
yeah,
Because she wanted to be part of this bigger tapestry of of the Skywalker saga or whatever.
or yeah, that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, but in reality, she is just a person, and that in itself is strong. Is strong enough because ideally anyone could be that hero.
Yeah, and then obviously, Rise of Skywalker is a response to the backlash to Last Jedi, and then just sort of undoes all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's yeah, no, yeah, it's no bueno. It's just yeah. I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, yeah, ultimately, I think it's that disappointment of like we wanted something, I guess, new. We wanted something different. Ultimately, I think a lot of Star Wars fans wanted, like let's continue the story, let's go somewhere new, let's do something else, kind of thing. And personally, I always thought like if we were gonna try to like take whatever the sequel trilogy had and try to remake it, I always thought it'd be kind of cool if instead of having the First Order just be a Empire Part Two kind of thing,
Mm.
if they were like, like take some real world inspiration, right? Have them be some sort of weird terrorist organization, right? That just sort of does terrorism things and
Yeah, but it'd be so you wanted the inverse of the original trilogy.
yeah, from a certain perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's like one of those things of like they make good points or whatever, and people start to get radicalized by them, and then that's how they get more power because they correctly point out some of the bad things about the republic, the new republic, and how they're handling things, and that sort of thing, right? Make it a
Mm.
bit of grays, right? Like but obviously still have them sort of be like like they're the bad guys, but they have points, but they blow up people, so we still got to stop them, kind of thing,
Mm.
right? Um, I don't know. It's one of those things.
Ultimately, the heroes have to find a way to help the situation, even if it means having to go up against the 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 the, the New Republic.
Potentially, I don't know. I guess I was thinking more sort of like I guess maybe Killmonger it.
Oh, okay.
you
Oh,
know,
okay. Yeah,
yeah, like Killmonger it, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
'cause obviously Pac Panther Killmonger is like he makes good points, but he also wants to kill everybody. So
Yeah.
let's not do that.
Let's not do that.
Yeah, so that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, ultimately, is the magic gone for Star Wars? I don't really think
No, I
so.
don't think so either. It's
It's more of those
like
things.
I know we've spent the most of the time just kind of like talking about all the bad stuff, but in reality, I don't think the magic is gone. I think it just I think I think you just I think it's very evident of the way this kind of episode went through, right?
Yeah,
I think the negatives just kind of outshined a lot of what is the magic of Star Wars.
yeah, and I think and this is honestly probably why people have sort of overglazed the prequels is that sort of newness.
Yeah.
Like people appreciate trying something different, trying being new, right? And I think that's ultimately why at least for the first two seasons of Mandalorian or whatever, right? Like people liked it because it was different. It was a bounty hunter story, right?
Yeah.
We haven't seen something like this in Star Wars before. It was kind of cool actually,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Andor again, new, different, political sort of take on Star Wars and all this stuff. Like that's why people like it. So if
Like I haven't seen the Acolyte, but there's already people who are going back to like, okay, hold up, this wasn't that bad.
yeah, I just got taken over by some weird culture war grifters or
Yeah.
whatever, right? You know.
Even and people are talking about like, why is everyone like, you know, not talking about Skeleton Crew, which I've heard is very Goonies
Mm-hmm.
inspired. Which I'm like, you mean a show that would be that what some kids are gonna check out? Yeah, that sounds like cool. Because the Goonies is like a huge thing for like a lot of kids in the '80s.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, that's what I think. That's ultimately what I think would get the magic back, I guess, if you're a Star Wars fan, if they're gonna make a new trilogy, right? It's like, let's actually go somewhere new. Let's actually do something different. Let's do something interesting that pushes is the story and the universe of Star Wars into a new direction and has like some crazy takes. All right,
Mm.
maybe not everybody's gonna like it, but at least we tried something new, right?
Which is the thing I always give the Last Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
At least it tried.
Yes, definitely. It's like I said, like at least Ryan Johnson. However you feel about the guy, like tried. All
Mm-hmm.
right, and that's what I think people like. What I find weird because like George Lucas tried with the prequels to do something new and different, and people weren't appreciative at the time. But then now, the kids who grew up with the prequels are their biggest defenders,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like to me, it's like how are you not seeing the parallels here? Is it just
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, I didn't treat Luke how I wanted him to treat him, and it's like, well, I get what Ryan Johnson was trying to do with Luke Skywalker because I think he even said it himself or whatever. Like if you look at the stories of old heroes like King Arthur doesn't get a happy ending.
He doesn't.
Like you think he does because that's where the story sort of ends, but then when you keep on reading, he doesn't. He
No,
doesn't
he
get.
dies.
Yeah, like he dies and then it's it's over.
Yeah. He's like, oh no, he'll come back. Like, I mean, it's been years now. He ain't coming back, bro.
Last time I checked, he's supposed to come back in Britain's greatest time of need, and apparently that hasn't happened. Didn't happen for World War One, World War Two. I wouldn't count breakfast as their time of greatest need because that just seems like
I
a
wouldn't
bit of
count
a
Margaret Thatcher. Apparently, Margaret Thatcher wasn't the biggest time of need.
yeah, what's this dude? What was the guy that was the blonde dude, fat dude that was the prime minister for a while?
Boris.
Boris Johnson. Yeah, Boris Johnson was prime minister. That wasn't the time of greatest need. Hell, right now is not their time of greatest need, I guess. So King Arthur, I guess he's just kind of sleeping, just
Yeah.
hanging out.
Yeah.
But anyways,
It's when your parents like, oh no, the the little dog's sleeping. It's okay.
we're gonna send him to a ranch upstate. We get to run free with all the other dogs.
King Arthur running around free with all the kings. Oh man,
Uh,
that's a good one. But yeah, no, I think it's just like it's really weird. I mean, I don't think like here's the thing. You can be critical, yes. But can you still enjoy something that still being critical? Yes. Should it ruin your view of things? No, it shouldn't, unless you're really weird.
yeah.
I think that's a good place to end it. Honestly, I mean, here's the thing. When it comes out, we'll check it out and we'll give you our thoughts. Does it destroy our fun of Star Wars? No, because like I'm gonna be honest. Every time I see a lightsaber at a con, I'm like, no, 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 no.
We didn't even talk about Star Wars games,
Oh fuck yeah, the
Which-
games are awesome.
Yeah, like I mean,
People are excited about the
the pod racing
Racer,
game.
yeah.
The,
Well, Knights of the Old Republic is
yeah,
apparently
getting
coming back. I don't
yeah
know. I
remake or whatever. Yeah, obviously the Jedi
Fallen
stuff.
Order.
Yeah, and Survivor.
Yeah.
Games have been well received and stuff. So it's
Mhm.
like, again, we're doing things different. We're doing new things.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately how you get that magic back.
Mhm.
And if it means we have to drag the certain part of the fandom kicking and screaming that's like, no, I don't like this. It's why can't it just be OT over or whatever, blah 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 kind of things, right? Like, no, you're coming in, you're eating your vegetables, damn it.
But I don't like broccoli.
Broccoli's good for you. Spinach is great. You know.
Fucking spinach omelet. Hell yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah. Popeye was right, bro. We gotta put more Popeye cartoons out there.
That's what we really need.
Yeah, that's what we really need. Yeah.
More Popeye cartoons.
Yeah.
Oh, we forgot about the animes
Oh yeah,
Visions.
the Visions
and all the other animated shows they come out with. So, like I said, it's not essentially dead. It's not. It just. I think there's. I guess like we said earlier, I feel like we focus too often on that negative that we tend to forget the gems that are there.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think that's sort of the conclusion of all of this is that like there are good things in Star Wars, and we should be acknowledging and praising them when they do things different because that's where the magic is still at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, sure, people. I mean, I think from what I remember, people complain about the Studio Triggers Star Wars bit?
Yeah, I'm like, I kind of was one of them, but at the same time, I'm like,
It's
it's
Studio Trigger,
for me,
bro.
it's like, Studio Trigger's gonna go ham and it's gonna be like really weird for me. But at the same time, it's Studio Trigger.
Yeah, they make Kill la Kill and stuff, man. Like,
Have you not seen Promare?
yeah, I
It's
think
like
yeah.
it's like Gurren Lagann adjacent with a little more gay.
it
Happy Pride.
is Pride Month,
Yeah,
guys. All right, listen.
yeah,
All right. But anyways, I think that wraps it up, right?
yeah. No, I'm glad we wrapped it in a positive note.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't want it to be all negative, and thankfully we didn't do that. But if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to follow us on all social media. We've got Facebook and Twitter. We're all active on, and we're most active on Instagram with a link tree. The podcast that we're officially part of, like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, all the like, and a link to the YouTube for all you audio listeners out there who want to put a face to the voice. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and a face on for support. And yeah, me, boy,
Me, Joe.
Star Wars is gonna be fine, guys. In the meantime, you guys have a good one. Peace.